that if some people or somebody is less qualified, they will get a job anyway, or they'll get into college anyway because of what group or what box they fit into. Okay, before continuing on with this guy's ranting, let's think about that for a second. So, Democrats, communists, and socialists. Well, first of all, Democrats, communists, and socialists are three very, very different things. And anybody who knows anything about what these words mean realizes that it's like saying frogs, trees, and mice. One thing that those three groups do is X. Well, frogs, trees, and mice don't do much of any of the same thing except exist on Earth. So Democrats, communists, and socialists, that's just, throwing those things together is just an attempt to kind of conflate them as if they're all somehow the same thing. And so diversity, saying that we need diversity, according to him, is saying that we're not all created equal. So some people are less qualified, they get a job or they get into college or what. Anyway, that's pretty far away from being anything that could even be considered true. But let's think about it in the sense that let's pretend this is a good faith effort on his part to describe something. So if I have a business and I say I need a more diversified workforce, so I'm going to reach out to minorities and women, let's say, to get them in my workforce because I feel that there is some advantage to having these people on my team. I think there's an advantage because of the advantages that come from diversity of opinions, of ways of doing things, of ideas, whatever, on my team. So what he's saying is that if they're less qualified, so he's looking at qualifications as being an across-the-board thing. Like there are a limited number of ways that you can be qualified for something, and that's it. So apparently having a different way of doing things, having a different opinion, being younger and not so set in your ways, being an outsider who maybe has new and original ideas, none of those things are qualifications. The only things that are qualifications, in his way of looking at it, are stuff you can test, in a particular kind of test. So he's limiting it. He's saying when he talks about people being created equal, he means people are all exactly the same in potential or lack thereof. And that, therefore, you either have potential based on certain characteristics that are predefined or you don't. And that's all there is to it. So he's saying that by people valuing diversity are somehow valuing things that have no value. We're somehow looking at people and saying, well, because you come from this different group and you have a different way of looking at things or doing things, I think you bring a value to me that I wouldn't get if I had somebody that was just like me there. That's not a value in his way of thinking, apparently. That's just nonsense. That's the only way I can understand it, because the whole point of diversity, the whole point of people saying that we need more diversity is because they're saying we value the different ways, the different ideas, the different sets of experiences that people from different backgrounds have. That's what I mean when I say diversity is a good thing. I think diversity is a good thing because I find that when I work with people who have very different ideas from me, it expands my understanding of how things can be done and what things are possible. That's how it works for me. Apparently for him, it doesn't work that way. And it can't work that way. That doesn't mean anything. You just have certain set of qualifications, and apparently being different somehow in his mind means being less qualified. I guess. I'm not sure. Anyway, he continues. So he says, women, African American, Hispanic, they're chopping us up into different pieces and getting us fighting against each other instead of spending our time saying everybody should be judged by their own talent, their work. I don't see where he gets this from exactly. But, I guess in a way, if I point to different groups and I say, well, here are groups that have been traditionally marginalized for various reasons. For example, women have been marginalized. Men tend to talk down to women a lot of the time. They tend to say, oh, well, you wouldn't understand that. You're a woman. We're working on cars here. Sorry, you're a girl. You don't understand cars. You don't understand sports. You don't understand anything. These are assumptions that people make. So if I'm saying, let's forget about these assumptions. Let's put a woman in here to help us with this. Then it seems like what he's saying is, well, does she have the same experience as a man? Well, no, she doesn't. Why not? Because men have not allowed women to participate in these things until very recently. So she doesn't have the same resume. Whoa, I'm hitting things over here. Same resume as a lot of guys would have. You'll find more guys with these extensive resumes because guys have been allowed to do this kind of work longer than women have, or African Americans, or Hispanics. So from his way of thinking, there's no way to change this. This is already set in stone, these inequalities, and they need to remain that way because the only thing we're allowed to judge people on is, the stuff that we see on a sheet of paper. He says, spending our time saying everybody should be judged by their own talent or their work. Well, how do you judge somebody by their talent or their work until they have a chance to show you their talent or their work? They don't have that opportunity if you don't let them in. You don't let them in if you don't give them a chance, and you don't prioritize bringing them in when for years and years and years they've been kept out. If you keep somebody out from all your meetings, all your discussions, and then at the end you say, well, do you understand as much about this as the rest of us do? They're going to go, well, no, I haven't really heard what you've talked about. Like, oh, well, sorry, we can't use you because we only want people that really know what's going on. Why don't you know about it? Because no, I wouldn't let you in. That's the problem. That's why we need diversity. He doesn't even understand that. So it's possible that he's just stupid and he doesn't understand this. It is possible. I mean, it may not be prejudice. It could be someone who just doesn't really understand how things have been working, doesn't see the problems, and is just somehow missing them and is trying to understand what's going on based around this very limited, narrow way of thinking. I don't know. But let's go on and hear more of what this person has to say. So he says, quote, once we say that Republicans want these traditional ways that made America great for all these years, then maybe African Americans will realize if we enforce our immigration laws, there will be more opportunities for Americans of all backgrounds. Wow, there's a lot packed into that. Once we say that Republicans want these traditional ways that made America great for all these years. So, in a sense, what he's saying there is that the traditional ways that made America great, some of those traditions have been discrimination against African Americans, discrimination against women, people of color. That has been a tradition in America for pretty much the entire time the country has been called America, or the U.S., rather. So there's a problem when you get into this discussion of traditional ways that have made America great. First of all, when was America great? What was great about America? Its power? Its wealth? What are those things? Its ideals? If you're talking about its ideals, its actions never matched up with its ideals. So that's an iffy point there. You can't talk about the ways that made America great. The ideals, pretty great, most of them. But our actions didn't match up to the ideals, so we weren't that great then. So I don't know. It's again, maybe he's just really stupid, or maybe not very well educated about these things. I don't know. Let's go on. So when we talk about women saying, well, we need special care for child care, we need this credit and that credit, I say, wait a minute. When America was great, one parent alone earned more than enough money to comfortably support a family. That's when America was great, apparently, was when one person could earn enough money to support a family. So I'm not sure what he's saying. I mean, he certainly seems to be implying, as the article states, that we were better before women, we were great in the days before women worked. Maybe he means that women wouldn't have to work if husbands could bring home enough money. But that's assuming that women don't want to work, that they just want to stay at home. So I can't even give him the benefit of the doubt on this one, because that's just pretty weird. So the article concludes by saying the comments were filmed by the American Bridge to the 21st Century Group, a political action committee that tracks Republican candidates, and were reported on by Philly.com. When contacted by Philly.com on Monday, Grossman, who has aligned himself with President Donald Trump, stood behind his comments. Grossman faces Democrat Jeff Van Drew in a race seen as key to National Democrats' plans to win back the House of Representatives. So here we have an example of somebody thinking. And we listened to what he said, and we discussed the way he was probably thinking. So at what point can we start to have a conversation with this person about how to resolve our problems when he doesn't even seem to understand the nature of our problems in the same way, or what those problems might be, or how they could be solved? He's got a solution. Let's go back to the good old days when what? When America was great, apparently, according to him, whenever that was. And so it's like, where do you even begin with somebody like that? Where do you start having a conversation if you hope to come to some common understanding where you both can agree on a solution? I don't even know, because I don't agree that America was great when he says it was great, or that we would want that same kind of greatness again now if we had the opportunity. He would, apparently. I wonder, with a name like Grossman, which sounds Jewish to me, if he is thinking that the days when America was great, they also happen to be days when there were fairly anti-Jewish. A lot of Jewish people changed their names so that they'd appear more European, more white, more non-Jewish, or whatever. Did he think it was great in those days, or did he just want to change that aspect, or does he even care? I don't know. I'm not even sure how you'd have a conversation with it. Okay, moving on. Here's another person. We've talked about this person. I'm using the word, I'm stumbling over the word person here, but he is a person. Attorney General Jeff Sessions. So, he ruled Monday that immigration judges should not grant asylum claims on the basis of applicants being the victims of domestic violence or gang violence. Los Angeles Times first reported the decision. Immigration courts are housed in the Justice Department, not the judicial branch, and Sessions, as a result, can set precedent for immigration judges dealing with asylum claims. Sessions used that immense power to review the case of an El Salvadorian woman, known legally as Mrs. A.B., who had been brutally abused by her husband before she fled to the United States seeking asylum. Ms. A.B. told NPR last month that her husband had raped and beaten her. She said she was also beaten while she was pregnant. At issue is whether the victims of domestic violence and gang violence can be considered members of a particular social group, a term used in both international and U.S. law. A historic 2014 Immigration Appeals Board decision broadened the definition of the term to include, in that particular case, married women in Guatemala who are unable to leave their relationship. A year later, Slate noted, the same appeals board broadened the definition to include victims of violence within a domestic relationship. On Monday, Sessions declared that the 24 decision is overruled. Quote, generally, claims by aliens pertaining to domestic violence or gang violence perpetrated by non-governmental actors will not qualify for asylum, Sessions wrote in his ruling. While I do not decide that violence inflicted by non-governmental actors may never serve as the basis for an asylum or withholding application based on membership in a particular social group, in practice such claims are unlikely to satisfy the statutory grounds for providing group persecution that the government is unable or unwilling to address. The mere fact that a country may have problems effectively policing certain crimes, such as domestic violence or gang violence, or that certain populations are more likely to be victims of crime, cannot itself establish an asylum claim, he added. Many women sitting right now in detention under these claims might lose their right to obtain protection and be deported to dangerous situations. Dennis Gilman, director of the University of Texas Law School's Immigration Clinic, told the Los Angeles Times. In addition to rejecting the 2014 appeals ruling regarding domestic violence, Sessions additionally specified the victims of gang violence were not identifiable as a particular social group. Quote, victims of gang violence often come from all segments of society, and they possess no distinguishing characteristic or concrete trait that would readily identify them as members of such a group, Sessions wrote. New York Times noted that earlier Monday, Sessions told a group of immigration judges, Justice Department employees over whom he has oversight, in a speech that he would soon issue a ruling that restores sound principles of asylum and long-standing principles of immigration law. So, basically, I'm not sure what to say about this. It's so obvious what's wrong with it. What he's doing is something that so many people have done, is over the course of years, when they don't want to protect something or punish something, they define the letter of the law in as very narrow, specific way as they can in order to exclude the people they don't want to punish or to include the people they do want to punish. It is one of the many ways that the law has been abused and continues to be abused and will always be abused since time immemorial. Now, if Sessions were here, he would probably say, well, no, that's not what I'm doing. I think that previous administrations have made overly broad rules that were not appropriate, that expanded these definitions too far, and all I'm doing is bringing them back to where they should be. The question, though, underlying question of all of this is, why should they be in this particular place? Why is it important to make that definition? So if we've expanded this definition to include victims of domestic violence or victims of gang violence, why did we do that? What was being done? Well, what was being done was we saw people in need of protection, that there was no existing law that specifically protected them, and we're saying, okay, how can we protect these people? They are victims. They have been victimized. They have been hurt. They are in danger. If we send them back, they will be hurt again, very likely. How can we spread our protection farther to cover this other vulnerable group? And what he's saying is, we don't want to cover this group. We don't want to cover them. We don't have to. It is not specifically written into the law that we have to, therefore we don't want to. Right? Do you disagree with anything I just said there? I can't find any flaw in that. That is what's going on here. That's what's happening with this decision. It is specifically narrowing the definition so that you can exclude more people from protection. Because why? Why do you want to exclude more people from protection? If you have the power to protect people, why would you want to exclude anyone from that? Apparently, you don't think they deserve it because it's not costing any huge amount to protect them. All you're doing is letting them into this country. You're saying, okay, come on in. Make your own way. Do whatever you're going to do. We're not going to, set you up on a golden throne and ply you with the unguents and ambrosia, plates of I mean, it's not, it doesn't really create a problem. It's just we're saying, hey, you got a problem somewhere else. I have the ability to help you simply by letting you come in. Why would you not do that? I would do that. Anyway, on that charming note, let's read some more here. Finally, I'm running out of time here, so I've got time for one more thing. This is a story about a roundup of immigrants in Ohio. And this is an opinion piece. This is less a news piece, but here we go. So this is a story about children. But first I have to tell you what happened to the adults who love them. Earlier this week in northern Ohio, 200 or so federal immigration agents with weapons and trained dogs swarmed two garden centers of a family-owned business. They rounded up and bound the wrists of more than 100 immigrant workers, most of them Mexican and undocumented, some of them U.S. citizens. They marched them to waiting buses as if they were armed criminals instead of people who bring all of those hanging flower baskets and weedless lawns into the summer lives of Ohioans. Notably, none of the employers who hired them was arrested or charged. They may have to add their business to the growing pile of community casualties of this new immigration. Excuse me, I lost my place here. Okay. Okay. New immigration policy. Sorry. I pressed a button and everything went crazy. One of the employees, Rudolfo Reyes, told the Norwalk Reflector he knows that the officers have a job to do, but he says they were very, very rough. Quote, a bunch of cops came running into the warehouse, pointing guns at people. Everybody was scared. They tied everybody's hands up with black zip ties. Even my daughter and I were tied up, even though we're U.S. citizens. Everybody panicked because it scared them. Sama Sabala, who works at the nursery with her mother and sister, told this news organization that undercover officers initially misled employees by showing up in their break room with boxes of Dunkin' Donuts. Then the immigration and custom enforcement show scripted for the media began. They're armed. They had the dogs. We hear the helicopters on top of us, Sabala told the nation. They took them on a big bus. All I could think about is my mom because I didn't know where she was. And also my sister because I didn't know where my sister was either. And everyone was just crying. The latest ICE Carnival was brought to you by the Donald Trump Roadshow. It's not really about stolen American jobs or evil immigrants, neither of which is a threat here. It's about a reality show president's desperate attempt to keep his base worked into the frenzy of fear and rage he needs to feel special. The people you haven't seen in this latest farce are the children who were left behind in daycare or with babysitters separated from their parents. The day after the raid, I called Veronica Isabel Dahlberg, who is the founder and executive director of Hola, Ohio, an advocacy group for the large Latino community in Northeast Ohio. She is always one of my first calls when another crisis seizes her community. We have no idea how many children are currently in hiding, she told me when I reached her. We're still trying to find that out. Earlier, in a Facebook post, she described her trip to Norwalk, Ohio, where most of the detainees live. She visited the trailer park where hundreds of Mexican families who work in agriculture have lived peacefully for many years. It was a ghost town. Their top priority was to protect their families. People left their cars, she told me. There were boxes spilled open. People just disappeared. Most of the children were born here, but many of their caregivers fled because they're undocumented. Too, and they're afraid of being arrested. A local church became ground zero as volunteers helped to gather people and figure out who was missing. We did a type of triage, Dahlberg wrote in her post. We will be collaborating with a team of volunteer lawyers who are on standby ready to take cases. Imagine relying on a lawyer willing to help you find your missing child. Jesse Hahn, a workers' rights attorney with the National Immigration Law Center, says this ICE raid was different from one 2 months ago at a meatpacking plant in Tennessee. Until this week, it was the biggest such raid. ICE agents arrested 97 workers, mostly from Mexico and Guatemala, but everybody was taken to a single location for processing. They were in a National Guard armory, and everyone in the community who felt safe to be there could see who was getting released, she said in a phone interview. This time, though, some of the workers were driven to Youngstown, while others were driven to Michigan. I don't even know if they were processed on site, Hahn said. We're hearing some were released because they are primary caregivers for their children, but we can't even confirm that. I would love to tell you why ICE did it this way, but I'm still waiting for that return call. This is what we do now in America. Our government singles out brown and black children and traumatizes them as policy. We rip their parents away from them and claim we're protecting American jobs that Americans don't even want. What we don't even pretend this isn't what's happening. We just say this is how it's going to be. So I've run out of time. I've had some more stories here, but that's basically gives you a sense of kind of what's going on and why it's so hard to talk to people. Why it's so hard to make any kind of change? Because what the change these people in power, these people I'm talking about here, are trying to make is one that has nothing to do with a reality that I know. The world that I live in, the people that I know, my friends, all those people, not all of them, but many of those people are in danger, under threat from those people that I was just reading about. What are they doing that is wrong? The only thing that they're doing that you can even vaguely consider wrong is that some of them are here without proper documentation, or they are trying to help people who do not have that documentation. That's the only thing that's wrong that's they're doing. In any construction of the words right and wrong. However, they are seen as a threat, as a problem that must be dealt with, as something that does not belong and must be gotten rid of, no matter what, by certain people. And there is seemingly almost no end to how far they will go in trying to achieve that. And sadly, there is enough support for it that people are either not willing to argue with it, or will just say, oh, well, I wouldn't do it that way, but, you know, golly, they're in charge, or whatever the thing is that they're saying, and leave it at that. And that's all the time I have. So, thanks for listening.